is Shy Perry. I am the gallery coordinator here at the Kansas City, Kansas Community College. This space has been open for about 6 years now. I've been here for 4. In my curatorial style, I like to focus on history, diversity, and equity, and bringing all those wonderful things together. Educating, of course, because we're a school, but just really teaching people who don't know, what is art? What can it do? Well, art can do everything, is how I put that. So this show is very exciting. Polly did a wonderful job curating it, and I'm very excited to see all the artists and poets here tonight and listen to your point of view about your work, because I've only met you, some of you, through your pieces. So it's nice to see you in person.
Thanks.
I think we can go ahead and get started. If more people come in and join us, that they can. So Polly, if you would like to go ahead, and if we want to go ahead and introduce everyone, or if you want to let everyone introduce themselves, that's fine too.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. We should go around and introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm Polly McCann. I am an artist and a writer, and I am Gloria Hefner's studio mate. We have studio space without walls. So we've been starting to collaborate more and more. So I talked to Shy about having a show at the gallery, and it's been growing and growing for like a year. The show's been growing, and we decided to put out a call for art and poetry, and that kept growing too. So that's how we ended up with a show with art and poetry, and it's women from all over the country. So that's really exciting. Here's Gloria finally got on. That's great.
Yeah, I think I'm on 2 devices.
Oh, that's okay. So if you haven't been on Zoom before, if you have 2 different views, you can hit the speaker view, or the waffle view is like the Brady Bunch, and you can see everyone at once. So you can choose and go back and forth. And when we start having our speech, you can turn off your mic, but when we're just talking, you can turn it on and talk with everybody. I don't know if there's anything else about all that I need to say. But I do hear something funny now. Okay. Should we go around and introduce ourselves? Should we do that? Or should we just stay on schedule, Shy? You're in charge of the schedule.
Well, go ahead and call out each person. If Gloria wants to go ahead and introduce herself, you may.
I can do that. I'm Gloria Hefner. I, again, am a neighboring artist to Polly. We have a really neat workspace down in North Kansas City, like Polly said, where we have no walls. So we have some partition shelves to close ourselves off a little bit, but it's still pretty open. So there's a lot of collaboration that goes on there. And I am the artist that did the portraits of the audacious women, which the name of the show actually came from a poem that I wrote back in 2016 with the way everything was going at the time. So that's what I'm doing here. I don't know where we want to go from here.
Good. Well, Catherine, do you want to
read? Can you read your poem, Audacious Women?
We will be doing that later on, yes.
Oh, never mind.
Well, yeah, maybe we should. We're saving it for last as the call to battle.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Catherine, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Catherine Phillips. I am a poet, an Episcopal priest, and a counselor. And I've been writing for years. And so basically I write a poem a day And I don't go back and revise ever. I just write a poem a day. And some of them are better than others. And that's kind of how it goes for me. So, you know, I've submitted a couple manuscripts now, and one of them got taken, you know, and it wasn't the one that I thought would get taken. So, surprise.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's called Numbered Like the Psalms.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's, Candace, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you
Hi.
introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Sure. Thanks so much, Polly. And Gloria, I love your artwork on RBG. It's so nice.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm Candace Kelsey, really honored to be here. I am a poet. I live in Los Angeles. I'm also a full-time high school teacher, so I've been spending a lot of time on Zoom. And I was very inspired by this. And over the summer, I designed my 12th grade class. I teach at an all-girls school. I decided to switch away from a year-long study of Moby Dick and do women's lit. So you guys inspired me, Polly. And it's been fantastic so far. Yeah, so I'm really excited. And yeah, just trying to write as much as possible during this time, and days of great inspiration and days of absolute numbness, to be honest. So hopefully this will give me a little inspiration.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Let's see, we have a Joanne.
Joanne,
I'm sorry.
there you go.
Is there any other poets that are on that would like to introduce themselves?
I can go.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Linda Neal Rising, and some of you might have heard earlier before everybody got on that I have a chapbook that's several years old now, and I have my first full-length book coming out tomorrow, and my second full-length book coming out in April.
Great.
I taught for about 32 years, so I can understand where you're coming from with the teaching. I've been retired for 10 years. I write fiction, poetry, nonfiction, but I've been focusing more on the poetry in the last few years.
It's wonderful.
Hey, thank you. Anyone else?
I'm the other half of Flying Ketchup Press.
Okay.
And so I would just like to say welcome to everybody as part of the backup team of Flying Ketchup Press. I'm the one who stays here and thinks through things while Polly talks. Keeps her from getting discouraged and sends her out every day and says, make art, make books, it's okay. And I am also a writer and a teacher and a musician. So my attitude is that literally, quite literally, art saves the world. And I need you, and everyone needs you now. So you're all vitally important and very, very special. I really love this particular show, every single part about it. So I thank you all for participating, and I can't wait to hear from you tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and I will mention again that in the chat box, I have dropped the link for the KC Studio exhibition review, if you all would like to read it afterward. And now, Polly, if you would like to share the PowerPoint so that you all can see what's here in the gallery.
I'm ready. Let's see. First, I'm going to click share. Hold on a sec. Then I'm going to present to you the slideshow. This seems to work. And hopefully, if you're on a phone, it's the right size for you to still see everything. Audacity was inspired by Gloria's poem by the same title. She showed me her poem and said, do we have the audacity to stand up for women's rights? And she told me quite a few stories about women's rights I didn't know. So we put a call out for artists and writers to join us in thinking about this topic. So these are the people that have joined in. Sharon Rodriguez, she's a photographer on the Kansas side of the river in Johnson County. Shai Perry is the director of the gallery, who you met, and Gloria Hefner is, and I both have studio space. So that's how the show became starting. Plus, we met at the Women's Artist Networking Group in Kansas City, started by CJ, which is a wonderful group which has really motivated all the women in Kansas City who are in the arts to get to know each other and work together into galleries. So this is a painting I did in I'll mute everybody. Let's see.
Got it.
So this is a painting, the first painting I did when I opened up my studio in 2015. I quit my job and I thought I was just gonna do art for 3 months. But this is one of the first paintings I made when I decided to keep going and making art. And I was really inspired when they said they were gonna start putting women on American money. And they said this was gonna happen and that they were gonna put Sojourner Truth on our money. So I got super excited and made a painting about how this was a new thing. We were gonna stand up for ourselves, think about women's rights, and it's hard to make art or be creative unless you're thinking about how to be free yourself in the way you're acting and relating to people. So she really inspired me, and I wished I could make a whole bunch of paintings of all the important women in American history, and I didn't get to do that. But what I did do is I decided to change my name. I decided that I needed an artist name. So I chose Polly Alice, and Alice is my middle name. And Alice also means truth. And I was inspired by my own family who have that name Alice, but also the name Sojourner Truth. I was always inspired by her since I was a kid. So in this show, you're gonna see several paintings and pieces of art from different, based on women from different periods of time. And the things that brought it about were the Me Too, the month where we were all talking about Me Too, the hashtag, and the Time's Up was another way people were talking about time's up, it's time to make things right for women, and the women's marches that have been happening. This is one of the first banners you see when you come into the gallery. The picture's a little bit fuzzy, but you can see that there's no frame, and Gloria is working with off the frame art. You can see in the little window, if you can see Shai in the gallery, she's showing it to you. So we decided to set up the show with the oldest to newest. So if you go into the gallery, you can start with Sojourner Truth, who changed her name so she could tell the truth about equal rights. And you see the banner about listening. And then Gloria took the paintings and she'll tell you a little more about them. But she has a quote here: "You may hiss as much as you please, but women will get their rights anyway." So as you know, even today, when you're marching for rights, there is a lot of back talk that happens. So Gloria can tell you more about that, but I really love this portrait, and as the curator, this was my favorite. So I asked to talk about Sojourner Truth because I love the fact that she named herself, that she was a writer and a speaker. And I love the way this portrait came out with the glasses, and it reminds me of how we need to see ourselves as empowered. So then if you walk around the gallery, you'll see all the different women. The next one Gloria painted was Lucy Stone, who was born in 1818. And from my limited research, I haven't done as much research as some people, but I know that women were marching for their rights for about 150 years before they got the right to vote. So Gloria picked certain women she was inspired by in her research. And I really love how the women look so fierce. They're not models. And they look very determined. We talked about it a long time, and we discussed how they have, they're very human. They have, just like us, they have 7 jobs, 7 children, a million things to do, and family to take care of, and they are busy. This says, "We want rights. The flower merchant, the house builder, and the postman charges no less on account of our sex. So you can see that's one of the, as we go through each part of the show, each woman, Gloria picked a quote to kind of symbolize their anger and their audacity. And if they say our sex, they're talking about their gender. So being mistreated for your gender. You can see in the background that there's some little circle paintings. Those are vinyl records. And Gloria will talk to you a little bit more about the Equal Rights Amendment and the work she did there. Let's see. We've also got Harriet Tubman. And Gloria, I'm probably, since we didn't do the back and forth ping pong thing, you'll probably have to come back maybe and talk about these some more. And we have a quote that's attributed to Harriet Tubman, but we don't really have a quote from her. So this is part of her attitude. And it says, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. And then also we have a lot of research for you that we can share later in a PDF if you want to use it with your classes. It's the research Gloria did with films and videos and books on these women to kind of get inspired to paint about them. And then we also included this beautiful, there's a shelf in the hallway of the school, in the college outside by the student center. And here we put a little bit more work. Gloria couldn't stop making things about women's rights. So like she painted women's rights on everything, records, little paintings, boxes, she couldn't stop. So I have a pair of shoes there called Freedom Shoes. That's one of my favorite symbols for art. And then up there, these little dolls, they are by Linda Jerkowitz, who's a wonderful fiber artist. And I bought these pieces just personally. I wanted one because they were in a women's art show. And then she brought me 3 to choose from, and I had to buy all 3 because I started crying because they meant so much to me to see these things called these women that represented our daily lives, of our hard work. And these are called the responders. So you can find out more about Linda Jerkowitz's art. We'll put a link for you. Then we have Susan B. Anthony. Everyone knows Susan B. Anthony, and she's always painted as an old woman who looks very fierce, but maybe a little tired. And I really love the way Gloria chose to put things on these backdrops. The backdrop of the canvas is poured acrylic, and it looks like she's fighting and surfing the waves, you know. And then she'll tell you more about this, but she also saved the paint from these pours and used those same colors to paint the portraits, which is almost technically impossible. So you'll see that everything has this sort of vibrant, kind of a cacophony, like a battle, kind of floating. And the whole room feels like it's waving, like the banners and motion is happening. Ida B. Wells, we get up to 1862 here. She says, oops, let me go back. She says, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And this is maybe my other favorite, or maybe it's equal, because this face could move mountains. I love how fierce her face is, and it just makes me want to get up and start doing something important. So next we have Lucy Burns. You can see the bright, fiery colors, and Gloria's going to explain to you some of the reasons she chose these colors and quotes. It says, it is unthinkable that a national government which represents women should ignore the issue of the right of all women to political freedom. And what's interesting now is as we move forward, it feels like these women lived a long time ago, but they really didn't, because her life span lasted till 1966. And Alice Paul, they worked together. This one says, most reforms, most problems are complicated, but to me, there is nothing complicated about ordinary equality. So you can see this sort of almost a haunting, this painting will haunt you. You just can't stop thinking about her face and her determination here. This is Bella Abzug. It says, the test for whether or not you can hold a job should not be the arrangement of your chromosomes. So I like this one. And she was born in 1920, died in 1998. And then we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you can probably notice that some of these seem to be from, some of these came out, you know, there were movies that came out in the last 2 years about some of these women, and Gloria would come back and tell me all about the movie, all about her research, and then paint another portrait. So I've watched these women emerge, and I've been really inspired to see the different ways she chose to go about it. This one has the young version and an older version of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I really like that because as an artist, I sometimes imagine people as different ages when I talk to them. I don't know. I like to think about how we're not always exactly how we look right now. So I really like this because this is how I kind of see people anyway when I look at them. I think of them as different ages all at once. And I like to think of that power of our young energy and the power of our older, wiser energy. So I really just adore this. And then this one does the same thing. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. Gloria Steinem. So you can see the difference in the expressions here between the older and younger Gloria. The difference in her hair, and it's just phenomenal. The story told here seems to last a whole lifetime. And the way her older and younger self are almost looking at each other. It's just a profound way of thinking about a portrait that I haven't seen before. This is one of my pieces that I threw in for my show where I was thinking about women's rights. And I just created a skirt out of old mattress ticking. And the mattress ticking represents being woke versus being asleep, about how to think about equal rights. And then the cape is made out of a flag I sewed out of scraps. And it has little tiny beer buttons, beer caps, because that was one of the jobs that was in my grandmother's hometown, was working at the beer factory or the beer office. And the other jobs I remember hearing that she did was volunteering on voting day, every voting day. So I was just thinking about all the different jobs we have. This one's called Justice Cape, Justice Skirt, and Justice Shoes. These are two more I threw in. A lot of my work, I was exploring fabric, just like Gloria, so I wanted to put our fabric art in. And our fabric art sometimes to me relates to women because we're sewing. In history, women were always sewing and maybe even told to be quiet. But now we're sewing, but we're using those threads to tell our story, to be activists, and to be artivists. So we're advocating through our art. And so these two are called Justice Book and Hold Fast to Dreams. So the button is a place of security, because an empty buttonhole represents loneliness and a full buttonhole represents fullness. So you can kind of see how the show moves around. This is right at the end. We've got these wings, and I think I might have named them wrong, Gloria. Is this what they're called? No, I figured I didn't remember the name. But we've discussed several different names for these. She'll tell you in a minute. And then one of the last things that was so moving about the show was the newest work that Gloria didn't want to hang up at first, but I said would show all of her energy and thought about exploring new mediums, are these banners that sort of hang in the air off the wall. And those have been since the recent marches in the last 2 or 3 months. We have breath and breathe. And so she's been exploring so many different kinds of fabric techniques. You can imagine what her studio looks like. Here it's all organized beautifully, but in the studio, the work just sort of flutters and flies everywhere. And you can see that beautiful energy of saying that all humans deserve to breathe and have breath. You can kind of see us setting up our show. And then the last artwork in the show is from Sharon Rodriguez. So she'll speak, I think, after Gloria. But I'll just show you a little bit about her work. This is a photography portrait. And what I love about how the show worked out is we didn't have room to add a whole bunch more artists to the show, but we had room for one more. So we asked Sharon to put in a photograph, and she'll tell you more about her work. But this photograph just shows an ordinary woman who finds her own freedom. So I felt like this was really important to show that if we don't find our own freedom and advocate for our own freedom, we can't advocate for other people. And this is 2 of the books that Sharon has published about her work taking photography of local homeless people and listening to their stories and sharing them. All right, so let me stop there. Did that work? Yeah. So that's kind of taking you around the room to see the beautiful art.
Now, if you all did see me, I was walking around the room. So while you all are talking more detail in your work, if you just tell me which piece, or if anyone wants to see a piece more up close, just drop it in the comment box and let me know, and I'll go up to it for you. So Gloria, would you like to go next?
I could myself there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I feel like a commercial. I am so excited that we have so many people here tonight. I don't often get the opportunity to have this many people in a room, well, not in one room, but in a whole bunch of rooms, to view my artwork. This all started when, like I said earlier, I wrote the poem Audacity, which I'll be reading at the end of this meeting, I think is how we've decided to do it, or towards the end of the presentation. And I started to realize that a lot of women that we really don't hear about at all have done so much so that we could have the freedoms and the rights that we have now. We still don't have everything that we deserve, but a lot of women have really gone through a tremendous amount to get us here. And it's easy to not even be aware of it because we take these things so much for granted. I was born in 1950, and so much of this had already taken place, but so much took place during my growing up years that I was not even aware of. We don't see these names in our history books, even though they fought and they invented and they helped us get to where we are right alongside all the men that are in our history book. These women are not there. I was familiar with the name of Susan B. Anthony, I think. I had heard of Harriet Tubman. I'm trying to think of other names that I might have been aware of at the time, but there weren't that many. I knew that there had been a time that women didn't have the right to vote, but they don't really talk about that in our history books either. I was aware that there was a time when women really didn't work outside the home. but there wasn't any discussion about that. And when I say there was a time that women didn't work outside the home, that's only a part of our society that had that privilege. Even though we don't consider it a privilege anymore, there have always been women that worked outside the home, and they have always been treated as second-class citizens. Let me rephrase that. We weren't even considered citizens back then, because once you got married, you became the property of your husband. And only when the Constitution was written, only land-owning men could vote, and only men were considered citizens of the United States. Only white men, let me rephrase that. And so I started learning about these other women whose names I had never even heard before. And one of those women was a gal by the name of Alice Paul. And if you want to show her image, her painting, that'd be great. She's one of the colorful ones.
In the corner.
In the corner, yeah. And when I started reading about her life, which was totally committed to this cause, she was totally committed to working for women getting the right to vote and for getting an equal rights amendment for women, which we still do not have, technically. She was a young Quaker, and I didn't know until I did this research that Quakers have always believed in equality for women and men, and all races, I think, also, which I did not realize that. And they believed in women getting as much education as they possibly could. So it was getting an education that led her to this cause. She actually went to Europe to study and met up with some suffrage activists in London, I think it was, in England someplace. I think it was London. And that's where she learned about serious activism and how to not be nice about it, to really get in their faces, which is what has to be done. She came back then and got involved with the women's rights movement, which had been going on prior to the Civil War, and actually was put on hold during the Civil War. And she got involved with the organization that Susan B. Anthony and I'm drawing a blank, there's another lady, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, had set up. And they were trying to play nice. And she just got totally frustrated with them and decided this isn't going to get us anyplace. And her and another lady by the name of Lucy Burns worked together during the Wilson administration. And the first thing that they did was to Wilson came to Washington, D.C. to be inaugurated, they put on a parade the day before. And he traveled to Washington, D.C., couldn't figure out where all the people were when he got off the train because he was expecting a crowd. They were all at this parade that these ladies were putting on. So that immediately disrupted things for him. And then they became what was called the Silent Sentinels. They would go down, they were the first people to protest in front of the White House. They would go down, set up these banners. They never talked, never raised their voice or anything, just set up these banners in front of the White House, leaving room for people to walk by, but they were in front of the White House and nobody could miss them. And And this went on for quite some time. And of course, the banners had slogans and statements on them that derided Wilson for not allowing women to vote and for not doing more than he was doing at the time. And also, when World War II came around, no, World War I, I'm sorry, it was World War I came around, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and their group decided, okay, we're going to support the war, so we're going to shut everything down during the war. Alice Paul and Lucy Burns wasn't going to have any of that. You know, if we're fighting for democracy across the ocean, we need to fight for democracy right here in our own country for women. So they really stirred things up for Wilson, for President Wilson, and really irritated the heck out of him. Then the thing that really got me was that at one time, finally, they had been taunted and had things thrown at them and harassed this whole time. And they were standing there silently with their placards. And then one day, they were arrested and taken to jail, tortured, harassed, fed rotten food, and they went on a hunger strike. And they were told that they had to have sustenance because they weren't going to have any sick or dead prisoners on their hands. So they were force-fed during this time. And I don't know how much you guys know about force feeding, but it is torture in and of itself. They were actually force-fed through their nose. You know, you don't like to talk about this, but this is what actually happened. They were force-fed through their nose. And then at one point, President Wilson, well, the word was getting out about how they were being treated. So President Wilson said, okay, I will give you a pardon. After going through this day after day after day, these women had the audacity, I love that word too, the audacity to say, no, we did not break any laws. We don't want a pardon. We want you to let us out. And he actually tried to have Alice Paul committed to an insane asylum. And if that had happened, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this the way we are today. But at least he was able to find a psychiatrist with a conscience. And he said, no, after I've examined her, she does not belong in an insane asylum. And then it wasn't too long after that that Wilson let all of the women out. And actually, this was a whole large, I want to say over 100 women, maybe as many as 200 women across the country, because there were other marches going on that was inspired by this. And there were women all across the country that had been thrown in jail at this time. And it wasn't too long after that that they voted to have the women's right to vote put into law. And I'm trying to remember, I can't tell you exactly how long it was, but we can thank Alice Paul and Lucy Burns for that. I mean, I am just in awe of those women. And like Polly said, we think of this as being ancient history, but they were still around during my lifetime. I just was totally unaware of them and totally unaware of the things that they had done. So those are two of my favorite people in this whole series that I've done. Was there some others that I was supposed to talk about, Polly? I know that I was going to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I also love.
Yeah, you were going to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the other one.
Yeah. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of, I think, 5 other women in her law school. And she graduated #1 in her class, at the very top of her class. After she graduated, had a law degree, had her law license, she couldn't find a law firm anywhere to work at and practice law. They would not hire her. She ended up teaching law on the university level for a number of years until she was able to start working for what's the human rights organization? I can't think of it now.
Amnesty International?
No.
ACLU.
ACLU. She started working for the women's rights arm of the ACLU and started taking on women's rights cases. Specifically, that's what she was doing. She may have done a few others, but that was her focus, was women's rights. And there's still so much that I don't know about her, because everything that she did was so involved in the law, and it's hard for me to read all those legalese type documents and stuff, but she has done more for women's rights than any of us really are aware of. And she does it so quietly and so eloquently. And she's just, she comes across as being such a quiet, soft-spoken woman, but when she has something to say, she is not soft-spoken at all. She really makes her point. And I didn't know enough about her either until I started doing this research. And also I saw the movie that was made about her, and that was amazing. If you haven't seen that yet, you really should find it and watch it. It's a very well done movie. And speaking of movies, to back up a little bit, there is a movie about Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, and it is called The Iron-Jawed Angels. And that was supposed to be the name of those wings, Polly. The Iron-Jawed Angels.
Okay.
That's what that was supposed to be. I could go on for a long time, but I think I've probably taken up my time, haven't I?
Well, we have time for some questions for Gloria.
Sure. Any questions?
Sometimes it takes a minute to get the unmute.
You all mentioned use of color in the various portraits. You want to address that?
The colors?
Mhm.
I was going to talk a little bit about my process also, which kind of comes along with that. And I have been for quite a few years now doing what I call poured acrylic abstract paintings, and really enjoy doing them. They're very therapeutic. If you haven't tried it, you should give it a try, even if you don't consider yourself an artist. But when I decided, well, let me back up a little bit. I realized recently, maybe not so recently, probably about a year or two ago, that I'm not having sit here and spoke for all of this time. I'm going to say I'm not a good speaker. I don't consider myself comfortable talking to people as much as I am inside my own head thinking about things. And I find that when I get in a discussion with people, I don't always come up with the right thing to say at the right time. You know, 5 minutes after the discussion is over, I might think, well, I should have said that at that point in time. And so I don't feel like I'm one to go out and debate and argue with people about things, even though I envy is not the right word. I am inspired by people who can do that, and we definitely need those people. And so I was thinking, well, what can I do? And I thought, well, I can use my artwork. And that's how this whole series came about. I thought I can paint portraits of people. And then I got one portrait done, and I thought, that's a face of a person. If somebody sees that, they're going to say, okay, that's the face of a woman. I don't know who she is, but that's the face of a woman, and walk away. I thought, well, how do I overcome that? And that's when I decided to put the quotes on with the faces of the women and with their names. And I thought, if nothing else, that will pique their attention. That will give them a little something more to grab hold of. And then they've got the woman's name, and hopefully it will inspire them to go find out a little bit more about this woman. So that was the process that I went through for that. The color decisions, Jan, I'm not sure I can explain that. I think it was more intuitive. You know, I looked at the woman's image, and I looked at what they went through, what the environment was like at that time. Like the Harriet Tubman, I know the journeys that she took, going back and forth to get more slaves and bring them out of slavery. And so that contributed to the colors that I chose. And again, I can't say I chose purple because of, you know, it's more like it was just kind of an intuitive thing that I really can't explain. I just felt like in most cases, I was really happy with the way the character and the background worked together. Does that answer your question, Jan?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love them. You know that.
I know that. Thank you. Anybody else?
It looked like Linda Turkowitz had a question.
Linda?
Yeah, is this the first time that you've actually done or kind of explored the whole idea of women and in art, in your art, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. I've in the back of my mind, I've thought for a long time that I would like to do that, but I didn't want it to be I didn't want it to be cliche, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I didn't, I come up with these wonderful images in my head, as anybody who's an artist can probably understand. But it's one thing to have it just floating around inside your head. It's another thing to crystallize it and bring it into full focus in a painting. And the two don't normally jive very well for me. But I feel like it came together in this case.
Do you have any other interest in terms of pursuing another series about a different group of women? I mean, obviously most of these women were about getting the vote and equal rights. Do you have another topic that you think you might want to explore in your painting?
I don't know that I have another topic, but I just think that I could do this the rest of my life.
Well,
you know,
so.
I mean, there's so many women out there.
Right.
And there's still, I'm still hearing names of women that I've never heard of before. And then I find out what they did. And it's just, you know, the Native Americans, there's so many Hispanic women, and there's so many strong women in our history. And I don't know about you guys, but I just look around me, even in this group right here, and see so many strong women that are leading their lives, doing what they want to do for the most part. And I just think that there's a lot more women that I want to paint. So this series is not done, that's for sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to also, because I think CJ wasn't here at the beginning when we were talking about how we all met, to thank CJ for bringing us together to have this wonderful show.
Yeah.
Because her event, Women in the Arts Networking Group, is how I initially met Polly and the other members. So
That's true.
CJ,
It is.
just that group
Very
alone
much so.
has empowered the Kansas
Yeah.
City Women of Arts.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Thank you. That's really sweet. I appreciate you.
Sharon, would you like to share about your work?
I think it helps if I unmute. I'm not unlike Gloria. I started out with a question in my mind and started doing some research and talking to some fellow photographers. And my question was, why does Johnson County have homeless? And quickly found out that that was a taboo subject, especially in Johnson County, the most affluent county in the state. And I was speaking dirty words and dirty language, and that didn't stop me. I wanted to find out why. And so my journey is about a journey of trust and gaining trust, not only with the homeless people, but with the resources. And I thank Gloria and Polly for putting this show together, and whoever else has been, and you, Shai, for being so instrumental, because we need to get our voices out there the best that we can. I didn't set out to do a social justice piece or series. I set out to answer a question. And in doing that, I talked to various resources for about a year, trying to gain their trust, and they wouldn't talk to me. They were doing their work, and that's all they wanted to do. And I started going where they were serving people meals, and where the pantries were handing out food, and I became a volunteer at these places so I could get my face known, and I could get to know different homeless people. And I was very upfront with each of the managers of the programs that I volunteered in, so that they would know that I was on the up and up, because I quickly found out that homeless women in particular are treated very, very badly and not given services like others, men in particular. So after about a year, I was so excited when I first found my first homeless person to photograph. I didn't have any food with me. I didn't have any money with me. And I quickly determined for myself that I was not giving money to a homeless person. I'd give them food or I'd give them clothing, but I would not give them money, because they tend to go and buy drugs and alcohol. And you'll quickly see with the photograph that I've chosen that I picked the most audacious woman in the group that I photographed and interviewed. I would actually sit down with each of these people. And the photograph, if you want to go to that, Shai, I'll read Yolanda's story, and then I'll talk a little bit more about my story. And Yolanda's story is in Homeless, Not Invisible. That was my first book that I published. And Yolanda, during our interview, I did the interview and then I wrote out her story according to what she said. And what she kept saying was, I am a survivor. So she, like some of the women that Gloria painted and told their stories, she's a real everyday survivor, and she is audacious. Listen to Yolanda's story. There is always a way out by finding a higher power. I tried to stop doing drugs and prostitution on my own. I couldn't do it. That life didn't work for me. I was riding buses to stay warm. I was staying all night in casinos to be safe. Now I have my own apartment. I was in a safe home in Missouri when I was connected to Johnson County Mental Health. My husband got me on drugs. Then I started prostitution. My mental problems started with the beatings while I was a prostitute. Now I am 7 months, and this was back in 2017. She was 7 months clean and sober. I go to programs and meetings to help me. I want to do volunteer work. I can meet my responsibilities. I am a survivor. And these are the type of people, and this is the type of story. People didn't like me doing black and white. I love color. I'm like Gloria. I love color. But black and white told this story better than I could have done in color. Also, writing out their stories to add to each one of the photographs added a depth to the photograph so that people could understand that we're criminalizing, just as women have been criminalized for centuries, this human element, this human being. And so I humanized the homeless women that I worked with. And I worked with men and women, not just women. But it was hard to not include both, because they're both out there. They're all survivors. They all have a story to tell. Some of it's true, some of it's not. Some of it's from a drug mind or an alcoholic mind or mental health, like with Yolanda. But Yolanda overcame her addiction and her mental illness, and she got help. It wasn't just on her own. She got help. And so that's what I encourage people to do, is don't try and do it on your own. Because I can't do, I have done these 2 books and this series on my own, but I'm starting to seek help with what I'm doing. And I was originally inspired by Dorothea Lange, and I don't know if any of you know who she is, but she's a famous photographer. I looked for Hispanic photographers that I could emulate, and I was told that there are none. And that's from my Hispanic heritage. And now I have my books and some of my photographs in the Nelson Art Gallery's library, so that I am leaving a legacy for women, and especially for Hispanic women. So it's been quite a journey. It's not always been easy. I've wondered if I'm crazy. I wonder where my next homeless person is going to come from, because I would often meet some of these people on the street, not just in food pantries and where they serve meals, but I would see them on the street and I'd talk to them. I'd stop and talk to them. And I swear my angels are going, "You're doing what?" Because, and other people told me, "Be careful. You're out there by yourself. You're a single woman. You've got to take care of yourself." I was taken care of. The only problem I had was one guy, I gave him my phone number, and he would call me when he was drunk or in jail. Excuse me. And I finally said, "You can't go." You can't call. I'm sorry. I have a dry throat. So it's been a labor of love. And my next project is to do something around the pandemic and the new people that are out there homeless, because it's a whole different look, whole different feel. Questions, comments?
I think your story sounds great. And I can relate to your dry throat, by the way. I wanted to let you know that.
Oh, thank you.
I was so glad I made it through mine without having one.
Yeah, well, I went through a health challenge last year that slowed me way down, and so I'm recovering. I'm successfully recovering. You can get my books. I sell my books. You can email me or contact me, and I'll be happy to mail one to you. I get more royalty on this from this publisher than if you order through Amazon. So that's why I encourage people to go through me. And I'd be happy. I do artist talks. I do shows. I'm starting to do more and more shows. I've got another event where I'm going to work with a homeless group. And so I'm out there. I thought things had, well, all of my work ended with the pandemic because the homeless went underground. But again, I'm beginning to see that there is a new group of people being created by this pandemic. So great question, thank you, or great comment.
Thank you so much.
And I think my website just got put up, or I can put it up.
Yes, Polly just posted it in the chat.
Yeah, and I do have lots of work in color that I've done. I did some travel photographs, some nature photographs, and it really hurt my soul to do black and white. But this, it's like there was a little voice guiding me to say it has to be black and white. It comes across much better as black and white. And again, that's the Dorothea Lange influence.
Polly, do you want to go ahead and start the poetry hour?
Yes. I've posted the links to Sharon's website in the chat and Linda Jerkowitz, fiber artist, so you can look up more of their art. And I wanted to introduce each poet because I'm so excited to have them. We're working on several poetry books at Flying Ketchup Press, and our newest release just came out. But I was really happy about these poets joining us, entering our poetry contest, and it was actually really hard to find poets who wanted to talk about women's rights and about marching for rights. We tried lots of calls, and so I was glad these poets came and wanted to share their stories with us. Let me open my little notes here. So I'm going to introduce Linda Neal Rising first, and she's going to read her poem called I March for You. She's a native of Oklahoma, a member of the Western Cherokee Nation, graduated from Northern Oklahoma, A&M College, and Missouri Southern State University. She has an MA in Humanities, and she's published in numerous journals. Let's see, and she talked to us a little bit about the beginning, so I'm just really glad and excited to hear her work today. So welcome, Linda.
Okay. I thought I'd just start out telling a little bit about how this poem came to be. As most of you probably were, I was really, really excited about the election of 2016. And I had had the opportunity to meet Hillary when she was in the primary before. And so when she was our candidate in 2016, I was thrilled because I really thought that we were going to have a woman president. And my mother, who will be turning 90 in January, kept saying, don't get excited because I will never see a woman president in my lifetime. And I kept saying, oh, yeah, don't say that. We're going to have a woman president this time, you know. And of course, we all know it didn't happen. And that was very, very difficult for me. So it was on my mother's birthday, January 21st of 2017, my best friend and I boarded a bus at 9:30 in the evening in Evansville, Indiana, and we set off for the Women's March in Washington, D.C. And I don't know how many of you participated, but we rode all night long, and then, of course, got there, and we thought it was going to be a march, but when we got there, it was so overwhelming. There were so many people, we couldn't even move. And so for many hours, we just kind of stood. So it was more of a standing than a march, but I was just overwhelmed by the number of people there, but also the variety of people. I mean, it was every nationality and religion and ethnicity and gender and just everything. It was amazing to me. And it will be something that I will remember for the rest of my life. But I didn't write about it at that time. I think I was still just kind of assimilating everything. I don't know, I didn't write about it. And then it was really kind of the beginning for me, because then when I got home, I found myself marching for all sorts of things locally. All kinds of things dealing with social justice, the safety for students as far as gun safety is concerned, the pipeline, the Dakota pipeline, you know, just all sorts of things. But one day I had someone say to me, well, why do you march? And this was just right about the time the pandemic was beginning. And I thought, okay, it just triggered something in me. And so I sat down and wrote this poem about why I did the Women's March. And I tried to think about not only the people who were there, but the women in the past who never had a chance to do all the things I was doing. And so that's what prompted this poem. And it is entitled Women's March on Washington, January the 21st, 2017. I march for you, for generations of women who slapped clothes upon rocks, fed shirts through ringers, stirred vats of bleached sheets, scraped knuckles against washboards. For women who pulled the plows, drove the posts, dragged the stones, and rested only when their heads leaned against the haunches of a cow as milk pinged into a bucket. I march for you, for all of the women who themselves walked along the Trail of Tears, the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, carrying their memories inside bundles of muslin. For every woman who was ever told she could not, I march for you. For all of the women who sat hunched over sewing machines, squinted through clouds of lint while the dye bled through their veins. For all the women who saved the rags, cut off the buttons, ate the scraps, eking by without a man's wage, I march for you. I march for every voiceless woman who waited for this moment, who held her tongue, was seen but never heard. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Hey, you can unmute yourself and give a little.
I was
That was incredible.
That was so good.
I really like the image of the knuckles on the washboard. I thought that was just such a great detail.
Thank you. Well, my family came on the Trail of Tears from Tennessee. And so I kind of thought about all of these women and, you know, the hardships that they went through and everything. And of course, I said something earlier about my second book is going to be about Oklahoma women pioneers. Well, my family was involved in that. They were those women pioneers. And so I was trying to get all of the history into that too.
Yeah. Sometimes the only way to get those family stories out is through a poem, because you don't have enough to write a whole story.
Right.
So I have the same thing in my poetry. I have the granny who shot the wolf. That's all it is. I don't have any more than that, but that's enough.
Right.
You know. So, all right. Well, thank you, Linda. Does anyone have any questions for her? Okay. Where's my notes? The next poet we're going to share with you is Candace Kelsey. And that's right, isn't it? Candace is next, yes. And she has a poem called And the Woman March. She has a poetry collection called Still I Am Pushing, just released with Finishing Line Press. Her poetry appears in many journals. She won the 2019 Two Sisters Writing Contest. She was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Currently, she's working with you might want to tell us about this.
Sure.
It might be old news. Tell us what you're currently doing.
So the O Miami Poetry Festival down in Miami, Florida. This spring, I was supposed to, we were supposed to have an event, obviously, and everything was moved online. And so my project that I proposed to them and got accepted, and I'm going to somehow try to manage this, will hopefully go up spring of 21 instead. And it's a merging of foster youth. I have a heart for foster youth and have served as a foster parent for a few years. And I wanted to combine bringing foster youth closer to poetry, but through the medium of skateboarding. So just trying to find that commonality, those threads, those pleasures that are part of skateboarding are very similar to poetry, in my opinion. The sound, the artistry, the very accessible nature of it, lots of things. So I was hoping that I could somehow bring poetry into the lives of Miami or Dade County foster youth, but through poetry, or through skateboarding. And so we're envisioning some sort of like skate park event where the kids can actually share their poems and maybe have some of them rendered artistically either on decks of skateboards or on some of the walls of the parks or whatever. But just talking about the same sort of freedom that skateboarding gives them in an urban environment, that poetry can also supply that as well. Yeah, so we'll see.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Hopefully it all comes together. It's a lot of moving parts.
I've heard that before. I've heard that about skateboarding. That's empowering and you can really grow just by becoming a skateboarder.
Yeah, not that I do it, but my son and my foster son did. Okay, so I'll read you this poem. It's called And the Women March. And this was inspired by the 2020 Women's March in Los Angeles. And I did march in the 2017 March in Los Angeles as well. And I took the image of the ecosystem of the savanna, you know, the grasslands, because for some reason I just feel like that's sort of the historical birthplace of mankind, and it's such a unique, diverse ecosystem and biome. And but yet, whenever we see images of the savanna, we're just shown these lions with this smug, arrogant look on their face, and that always bothered me. So I also think of the march as a movement, and of a movement of the earth. And so I'm thinking of an earthquake. And so I sort of brought the image of we marching women can shake up the earth. But I sort of merged that with let's kind of challenge the smug look on that lion's face, because maybe we can be the savanna that's opening up and moving. So this is And the Women March. Can you sense the savannas of our hearts bowing up, preparing for a fight? Lazing predators tense their sinews on this turf, popping, starting a wave inside their manes, while pause and pride unhitch from the rising rivers and grass warm-worn beds of privilege. Our pulsing hands chest deep in lands like Shelley's crumbling king Ozymandias. We cannot endure such beasts and won't. So we march today. We are parting the canopy with our voices. You can hear us shining light upon the blood. These savannas sing for us. They are us. We move together. We shift the boundaries, all the rivers.
Good, unmute so you can clap, guys.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, any questions or thoughts on that, or?
Have you written very much more about marching and women's rights, or do you just have a couple on that topic?
Well, I mean, I think, I've written a lot motivated by my experiences with the Me Too movement. And I've also written a lot about, I seem to be, with my poetry, I want to take something that is ugly and turn it into something beautiful. And that doesn't mean changing reality, but that just means bringing words and voice and dignity to things that are oftentimes violent or oftentimes degrading or oftentimes unjust. And so that tends to be more the theme of my poetry. But I have definitely written a lot about, campus date rape. I've written a lot about the backlog of rape kits. I've written body image is a strong theme in my poems. I'd love to read one more poem if that's.
Yeah, please do.
This one deals a little bit with, touches upon a lot of those. Let me go there. Okay, so this one is called Witch Doctor. And it's based on a true experience when I was a child living in Hong Kong. Witch Doctor. My mother took us to find a cure for my brother's footworm and my fear of kindergarten. The witch doctor asked me to stand. I stood and stared out his window, imagining my fingers in the Kowloon Bay and my little body thundering off from Kai Tak Airport. She smiled at the old man, his eyes rolled back like mahjong dice, his invocation to the spirits, perhaps. My two brothers sat, a refuge of odd symmetry, a catch of duck feathers in my mother's hands. As we left, she was at peace, and I was never the same. He obeyed the witch doctor, placing one feather under each of our pillows. My brothers dreamt of catching snakes, chasing bats, and never went barefoot again. I ordered my dolls to stand against the wall while I traced their shapes with that feather. I rolled my eyes and wondered who could hear the engine of my desire thundering. little girls like me, we squeeze the soft right out of ourselves.
That's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it.
So good, thank you. And where can we put something in the chat for where we can find more about your work?
Sure, do you want me to put my website?
Yeah,
Okay, I'll do that.
and Linda too, if you have a website. I couldn't find yours a minute ago.
I don't have a website, but
Oh, okay.
maybe I can send something out about the titles of the books and things.
Yeah.
Put that out.
Okay, so I think it's true that one of the poets couldn't come tonight. I don't see her. Did Joan ever call in? I don't think she could call in. Okay, so we have one more poet, and then Gloria and I wanted to end with a poem each. Our next poet is Catherine Phillips, and she introduced herself in the beginning. So let me see what else. She's going to read her poem called "We Woman," and she's a poet and an Episcopal priest. And she can tell us a little bit more about her work. I know she has a book coming out.
Okay. I've been unmuted. I just noticed that. So yes, when I have a friend who, when I said I was part of, I was part of there were many women who were ordained before me. And they said, no, you were part of the second wave. And I thought, wow. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was part of because I always dismissed it with, no, I wasn't part of the first wave. I was part of the second wave. So anyway, so this was part of the We Women. We women. We come in waves. We women, first a drop of water, then more drops. Then no one notices we were never there. We come in waves, we women. Then an ocean. Of course, we were always there. Always, always, always. Waves on the ocean, we women.
I love that.
So, thank you. I have another couple, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Catherine, I really liked that repetition of always, always, always. That was perfect.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's, there have been so many women who have been ordained now. And so, and I really was, when seminary, I was one of two. So it's like, I was ordained in '83. And so I've now been ordained 36 years. So it's kind of wild in some ways. So this next one is for Maya Angelou. She wrote, I Know How the Caged Bird Sings. And so this is for Maya. Against the odds, you made them into evens. Rewrote, then rewrote the rules again, then rose and rose again, singing, always singing. And now, whatever cage held you, we all have cages. Whatever cages held you, those cage doors have been flung open. And you are completely free to sing, to rise, and rise again. So that's for Maya.
Amazing.
And for me. And for me and for all of us. Okay, and this one is not for the women in the US. This is for the women in Saudi Arabia. The women in Saudi Arabia, they drive. They have taken to the streets in droves, in cars. Now they drive in broad daylight. So many, no one dares to beat them back, to beat all of them back, or senseless or silly. Seriously, they drive. It seems a small thing. It's not. The princess spoke on public radio. The king has declared it is now allowed for women to work in lingerie shops. The driving continues on. Civil disobedience, a supreme act of civil disobedience. It continues in daylight. The women all together.
Incredible. Oh, thank you. That rhythm is so amazing. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Does anyone have questions for her, for Catherine tonight? Or comments?
You said
this.
Oh,
Go ahead.
A couple people.
go ahead.
This is Anna Francesca, and I was just wondering if Catherine has ever been to Saudi Arabia, and what I see her shake your head, and
No.
what influenced her to write about those women.
It really was the princess who spoke on public radio. And she had, she talked about that. And so she talked about the women, driving now and talking about them working in lingerie shops. And I thought, wow, that was just such a incredible, odd combination of things. Driving, working in lingerie shops. And I want to know, who was working in lingerie shops before also.
Apparently women were not wearing undergarments. Thank you.
So, yeah. So, yeah.
That's just wonderful. I was thinking as you were reading that there is a country, it may be Saudi Arabia, but I want to say it's Afghanistan, where women had a lot of rights at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just yanked away from them. And that makes me think so much about the fact that we don't have our Equal Rights Amendment yet.
Right.
And yes, we assume we have a lot of rights. And right now we do. But how quickly that could be yanked away.
Yes.
And in the blink of an eye.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Equal Rights Amendment for people that don't know?
Yeah, that would be great.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and again, I was sitting here thinking of all the things that I didn't say that I wanted to say. And that's one of them. Last year, I realized that the Equal Rights Amendment had been passed by our government in the 70s, I want to say. I should know the date, but I can't remember for sure. And it had been then put to the states for ratification. And we needed 30 some states to ratify it.
Mm-hmm.
And the last I had known, we were short by 3 states.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to look at last year and I realized we're only 1 state short. Now, granted, they put a time limit on it, which they don't normally do that for stuff. But in this case, they did. And since that time, the Equal Rights Amendment has been ratified by, is it 37 states? I can't remember. I should remember that. But it basically would put into the Constitution that women have equal rights and, No, let me rephrase that. It basically would say that a citizen's right cannot be infringed upon based on their gender. Actually, I think the word they use is based on their sex. Yeah, you know, there's discussion about what one word means and what another word means, but basically it has to do with that. But that would then embed it in our Constitution. And people say, well, what difference does it make? We have the laws, but a law can be, as we have seen in the last few years, a law can be upended in the blink of an eye with an executive order, or you know, just put it before Congress again, and it can be gone, or by a vote of our Supreme Court in the blink of an eye. But you can't change the Constitution that easily. I mean, they would have to pretty much throw out the Constitution to get rid of it at that point. So.
And what wasn't it just this year that they finally got the last date?
Yes, Virginia.
So it took how many years?
Well, since the 70s, I think.
And from what this is the Anna Francesca, from what I understand, the challenge is that although enough states have ratified, there are states that have ratified that have since said they want to withdraw ratification. So beyond the timeline being up, that is specifically a challenge.
It is, and it would depend on whether they can actually do that or not. But again, it probably would be something that would have to go before the Supreme Court, I'm guessing. And right now that's kind of questionable.
Which is so silly. I posted in the chat what the Equal Rights Amendment says, and it is pretty straightforward.
It is. It very much is. Yes.
So Gloria painted the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, 100 times. And I finally said, what does this mean? And I said, you mean we don't actually have equal rights to men? And she said, no, I about fainted. I had no idea.
There are so many people out there that think that is already a part of our Constitution, and it's not. Never has been.
And they never mentioned that in school or government.
Oh, God, no.
College or the news or any book
I've important.
Read, or any articles I've ever read. And so it's a secret. It's a secret. I don't have equal rights. So that's why I wanted to have the show. I was like, we're going to have this show. Everybody's got to learn more about this.
Yes.
Well, thank you for informing us about how to get more informed. And we do have a link of more resources that you can research that I'll put on the Flying Ketchup Press website, and I'll give it to Shai to share. So we have 2 more poems to share with you. I have a little one, and then Gloria's going to share the Audacity poem. And I'm sharing a poem from the very end of my most recent poetry book. It's called Puss in Boots. And it's all the poems I've written in the last, since the last presidential election. I couldn't write any the first year. I had to go to therapy. But the second 2 years, I've climbed back and written a whole bunch of poems about what I felt. I didn't get to march in any of the women's marches, but I wanted to capture that image of the cat. And to me, the Puss in Boots is an image of a woman who rescues a man by being allowed to have men's rights, because the cat puts on a pair of boots and then helps the man achieve all his dreams and goals, and then is forgotten. So so that's what I named my book. And then I changed the spelling of boots to the spelling for the constellation, which is spelled a similar way, boot, but it's not quite pronounced the same. And I focused all of my poems on either cats or folk tales or constellations. It was the weirdest theme, and I wouldn't have done it except one of my writer's friends said that cats and constellations would be okay for a poetry book. So each of my poems is named after a constellation, and this one's named after a woman who helped, the folktale is that she helped discover Hawaii, because you can't find the North Star and use it to help find that far south at a Pacific island. You have to use a different star. So I wrote about different stars and finding the way home. And I'm just going to read one poem, and it took 10 years to write. And when I finally finished it, I thought it was kind of didn't make sense. But once I applied this woman's name to the story, her name is Macaulay or Macalia, I realized that the whole poem made sense. So it's kind of fun to splice. I like splicing art and poetry, combining different ideas, and sometimes at the very end, two stories will merge and they make more sense together. So I'm just gonna read mine. It's real short. It's called You Know You Are Beautiful. One day, you'll have to choose, like me, to carry your heavy load of unsaid words until you drown in them, or ink them into a tattoo and limp back to shore. You know what I decided, because here is my ink. Let no one tell you who you are and what your destiny is to be. God is love, and so love exists. Open your mouth and tell the world who and what you have escaped. Taste what is good. Tell your story. The ink running down your arm, down to your fingertips, that is what will guide your heart and your hands. Your imprint, your testimony, is what tested you, not what bested you. The question is not who you are, but what have you overcome? Open your eyes and cry out all your salt, for we are going to need it to flavor our words. Your truth is a wall. It will be your stones, your towers, your flags flying. Open your eyes. You were never alone. God sent the wind that carried you here. Thank you.
Very nice.
All right. Well, we are so on time. So we have time for more questions, and then we have time for Gloria's poem. And we have time if anyone else wants to say anything.
Oh, sorry. It's Anna Francesca with a question.
Yeah.
Do you, Polly, have any tattoos? And if so, will you share them, please?
I don't have any tattoos because I write poetry and art all the time, and I would probably never be able to make up my mind. I just make new things with external ink all the time.
Gotcha. Cool. If you could have a tattoo, what would you have and why?
I would definitely pick a tattoo from Guardians of the Galaxy, because it is a sci-fi movie where the little guy who's a tree, trees are my favorite things, and I've always wanted to have a superpower with plants. So I loved the character Groot, who is the tree, and he only says his name over and over. He says, I am Groot. And then at the very end, he decides to save everyone's life and sacrifice his life. And you don't know when you watch the movie the first time that he is going to come back to life. You think he's going to die. And he says, we are Groot. So that would be what I would definitely get a tattoo of, because I like the idea of finally understanding, if anybody could finally understand that we are all really each other. And I just think that's really sweet and cool.
That is cool. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
But I
definitely.
don't have it. well, does anyone want to say something they think they might do now, that they might have a new idea for a new project or thing they want to advocate about or for in the future because of hearing about some of these projects?
I have 1,000 ideas circling in my head right now. You know, with my recent work, I've been doing maps, and the maps that I was just looking up of the states, and each year when states approve the ERA and all those things, I'm like, maybe that'd be a good project for me to explore in that. So yes, that's where I'm at right now.
And you didn't, Shai, you didn't tell your story about why you came to Kansas City.
About why I came to Kansas City?
Yeah, that was a really cool story about how you came to the art conference and then you never left.
Oh, yes. In 2016, March, I came here for the National Clay Conference. I love the city. I applied for some internships here and a part-time job here in KCK at the college. They needed a gallery assistant. And in May, I moved here. So, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah. And my favorite story about you that I tell everyone, I'm kind of a tall tale teller. Like, I like to make everything super way important. But my favorite story that I always tell about you is how I do a lot of mentoring of artists, and nobody will let them hang up their art. Nobody will give us permission. They'll have empty walls and they still won't let us. And a lot of artists aren't allowed to hang up art in their own houses or their own studios because usually a guy will tell them that it might damage the plaster to put a nail in it.
Yes.
And so I always tell them about you and how you came to the college and you took out your hammer and you put art around the college, and somebody came out and said, "Oh, are you the person who we're supposed to ask to hang up art?" And you said, "Yes, I am."
There is not an empty wall on this college.
I love it.
We just put up 103 new works of art 2 weeks ago. So
cool.
It's growing, you know. I wasn't the first person to do that. The art committee did start just putting up art everywhere. But then when people saw me all the time, every day, changing art out, and they're like, well, can I ask you for a certain color? I like this color. I like to see that every day. I'm like, okay, sure. Let's talk about that.
Holly, if I could do a plug.
Yeah, sure.
The Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library has a journal called So It Goes. And this year, it's going to be a lot about the topics we've been talking about tonight. Okay. I'm going to have a poem in there about the suffragists. In fact, Alice Paul is one of the people I mentioned in my poem. But it's a lot about what we're talking about, protesting, social justice, that sort of thing this year. And I think it's going to be coming out, the launch is on October the 3rd. And usually we go to Indianapolis to do the launch in November, but this year it's going to be virtual like this on October the 3rd.
Well, tell me the name of it again and I'll type it down.
So It Goes, and it's the Kurt Vonnegut Library and Museum.
Cool.
Library and Museum. Okay. That sounds beautiful.
It does.
Yeah, and we're going to have a whole bunch of new calls for poetry at our press. So we just released our first book, The Very Edge, which is a collection of poems in French, Spanish, and English, along with 2 featured artists. And then next year, we're going to have another collection called Night Forest, which will be all folktale and dark, interesting poetry and art. So, and then I won't tell you what the call is. The new call will come up a little bit before January. So we'll have, it's a surprise, but there'll be more books you can enter to be in the book. And we also are gonna select some of our poets to invite them to submit a chapbook next year. So we'll have that news sometime.
Polly, are you going to have visual artwork in that call as well?
We always have an open call for artists. I need to repost it online because our old one expired, but we always have an open call for artists all the time. And our whole goal of the Flying Catcher Press is to promote artists and put artists first. So we do everything backwards. Sometimes we find the artist first, or we name the book after the art, not the writer. And we let all the artists, we want them to keep their copyright. So we do everything to kind of reverse the idea of not helping artists, and we promote a lot of diverse authors and focus on just poetry and short story and art, which is how we're launching our press.
Wonderful. Before we have our close, there's a couple of things that I just wanted to point out that I've put in the chat there. We will be having more events around this topic throughout the rest of the year until December. They're not all set in stone yet, so if anyone has any ideas, I'll put my email in there. Feel free to contact me, always looking for new ideas and collaborations. And then our Facebook page is where you can follow to see more upcoming events. So yes, and thank you all so much for being here. I've really enjoyed this.
I think I have, let me check. I might be able, just give me just a second. I lost it now. I was gonna see if I could read the poem from the poet who didn't get to come. She couldn't get her internet to work. I have it right here. Here it is. Well, here it is. Okay, I'll read this one, and then Gloria's gonna read her Audacity poem, which is so incredible that it inspired everything. So you're gonna love it. And if you want to get permission for us to repost your poems online or your art, you can just send me a little note and let me know. This is Joan Gerstein, and she couldn't come tonight, but I can tell you that she's a retired educator and therapist, and she's originally from New York, but she lives in California. And her poem is called The Worth of a Woman. Susan B. Anthony fights fiercely, champions women's rights, becomes first female minted on US coins. Her wisdom, vision, courage, recognized, sanctioned. The Anthony silver dollars disliked. 11 sides deem the coin useless. Phone booths, adequate for Clark Kent to discard clothes, have no slot for Susan. Mass transit blocks entry, vending machines refuse coins. Size and color confused with a quarter. Guarantee she will not be valued. A government-sanctioned way to trivialize women. Etch her face on an inept discus of money, like graffiti, carelessly sprayed in tunnels, a perfect way to put her out of circulation. It's a good one.
That was excellent.
Yeah.
All right, Gloria, you're last.
Is it my turn again? Well, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention, again, that I forgot to mention before. There are prints available, not on all of the Audacious Women paintings yet, but I'm working on it. They're going to get there. But there's several of them already on Fine Art America. And that's fineartamerica.com. And if you just put my name, Gloria Hefner, in the search, it'll pull them up for you.
Okay.
Also, I have a website that I've posted all of these women on and some other things that I've done. and that is the art studio of GloriaHeffner.com. So you can find information on other things that I've done there also. So the actual title of my poem is called Do We Have the Audacity? And Polly was just talking about taking 10 years to write her poem. I don't consider myself a poet, but this was inside of me. And I sat down in 2016, late 2016, and typed this out in about half an hour. And I haven't done any edits to it since then. It just poured out. So here we go. Do we have the audacity? From the beginning of time, they nurtured life and protected it from the harshness of the world. Then slowly, one by one, they stepped out of the shadow of man. One by one, they stepped into a world filled with hate for their audacity. They had the audacity to band together and demand that their gender be recognized as equal. They had the audacity to demand respect for their worldview. When by choice or circumstance, they found themselves alone with the life they brought forth, they had the audacity to demand they be recognized as having the right and the capability of protecting and providing for that life. They had the audacity to choose to refuse to bring life into their world. They had the audacity to endure when others tried to quiet them and beat them back into submission. They had the audacity to demand the right to own their property and to cast their votes alongside those who believe themselves the entitled superior gender. They had the audacity to continue walking forward when the world was desperately trying to push them back. They had the audacity to enlarge the world for every woman who came after them. Whoops, I realized I don't have the whole poem here. They had the audacity to change the world's expectations, allowing us to be so much more. And I printed this out and I don't have the whole thing. Polly, do you have it there? It's awful.
I have it. Hold on. It's right here. Okay, here it is. Let's see. I just gonna close the other thing so my share can find it. Hold on.
Where is it? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, where was I?
I hope I have the end of the poem. We're in trouble.
Yes. Where was I? The audacity to enlarge the world. There we go. They had the audacity to enlarge the world for every woman who came after them. They had the audacity to change the world's expectations, allowing us to be so much more than was possible for them. Do we have the audacity to continue what they started? Do we have the audacity to stand in the way of those who are pushing us into the shadow? Do we have the audacity to speak out to those working to quiet us? do we have the audacity to demand the same rights and respect for every woman and young girl in our country and in our world? Do we have the audacity? Sorry about that.
I hear clapping in the other room. Yeah, you can unmute yourselves to clap some more.
Thank you all for coming to this. This means so much to me. This is awesome.
It is awesome.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Gloria. I was trying to find your poem so you could. It was right behind me. I walked all the way
Yes.
around the room and it was one behind me.
There it is.
Yeah, I printed this out earlier and I didn't even look at it because I had it, you know.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. This was great. Really
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
thank you. I'm sure there'll be more things and collaborations, and we can connect again online. Or
Yes, I would love to. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Audacity 2, the return of the women.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.